I don't have a standing desk, and so I've got this really awkward setup at home where I've got my yoga block on top of my garbage can with a little mini standing desk kind of ergonomic thing that's getting everything eye level. So I'm doing the best I can here, but I'm balancing a couple screens at a different height. So a little bit about, who I am, why I'm super passionate about a virtual presence is that if you had heard my name 5 years ago, it probably would not have resonated. You wouldn't have heard it before. You may still not have heard it before this session, but at least if you Google me now, there's a little bit more social proof that I exist and that I've done things. And 5 years ago, it really wasn't the case. I started to really emphasize my personal brand and the content that I was putting out, the presence that I wanted to have because I realized the importance that it would play in the trajectory of my career, but ultimately in my own ability, in my own self-confidence, because before then I wasn't really sure if I had anything to share. I didn't know what my voice was. I didn't know how to share it, if people would resonate, if people would even care. And it was only in getting out of my own way, finding out what it is that I was truly passionate about, talking about things that I was good at, or at the very least curious about, that got people to also open up about what they were curious about, to start dialogues. It ultimately built my network, filled my pipeline for my business, opened doors to opportunities that I would have never dreamed of. And so I'm hoping to impart a little bit of that knowledge with you today in hopes that for your next step, they can be equally as valuable. So for part one, we're going to look at the importance of standing out online. We know it's important, but how can we take that theory, put it into practice, and make it our own? Part two, we're going to look at developing your thought leadership and credibility. So I meet with a lot of people, work with a lot of people who feel quite confident in their area of expertise, but when it comes to putting it online and making it available for people to engage with, to absorb, and to perhaps criticize, as that it does open the door for that, it becomes a little bit intimidating. So I'm going to share some tools on how we can develop thought leadership and credibility in a way that truly resonates with who you are and doesn't feel put on, doesn't feel like a show. Part three, we're going to look at building meaningful virtual relationships. So as we've seen now, the whole world has gone virtual, and from networking events to interviews to family meetings, we're FaceTiming. How can we pull what we've learned in our personal relationships through to some of our more professional relationships that we're either interested in building or have started to build and are interested in nurturing? Part four is going to be reserved for a roundtable discussion, but I do encourage you guys to ask questions in real time. I know it's kind of awkward to jump in and come off mute, but I encourage you to interrupt me. Don't feel bad, don't feel weird. I want it to be as interactive as possible because giving an hour-long monologue, it gets boring listening to yourself talk for that long. So feel free to chime in, leverage the chat function as well. And Emily, I'll ask perhaps if you see questions come in that I don't jump in and ask them in real time. I'll take as many as I can to make sure we're still getting through the full content, and then we'll leave more time at the end. And I remain available if you guys, after this presentation, are thinking, oh man, I wish I would have asked that, or that would have been really good to know, or someone's comment triggered something that only next Monday you're thinking, interesting, I wonder how to apply that. Reach out to me on LinkedIn, email, wherever you're comfortable. Be more than happy to continue to help. And without further ado, let's get started. So, as I mentioned, we know it's important to stand out online. We're here because we either are doing so and want to improve, or are a little nervous to kind of dip our toes in the water and wondering how we can get started. Now, the difficulty of standing out, either stepping out onto the scene as a thought leader or standing out from candidates if you're applying for a job, is that you're in the same market. You're competing for the attention of everyone else online, of the employers, of your audience, of the people, other thought leaders in your space. And one of the challenges is that everyone who's kind of looking around at what's happening and what's trending, they start to fall into the same best practices. They see, okay, well, so-and-so is posting this way, therefore that's the way to do it. Or I see a lot of people are engaging this way, so that's probably the best way to do it. And what happens is when everyone joins a trend, it becomes outdated really quickly. And you kind of just get lumped into the masses, and your voice and your engagement and the things that you're sharing, the expertise that you want to share, kind of gets swept away in that sea of people. So I want to take a look at not only the importance of standing out online, but how you can do it and the necessity of a personal brand in doing so. So the same way that we associate feelings with brands that we engage with every day. I mean, maybe you don't even need to engage with them, but you see a Harley Davidson drive by, for example, and you get that feeling of a reverence. They're kind of this rebel brand, and you feel that when you hear it ripping down the highway. Or maybe you buy Dove soap when you go to the pharmacy, and Dove is kind of synonymous with peace, with tranquility, with body positivity. These are the types of emotions that a brand will kind of leave as a lasting impact on you. And that's the same type of feeling I want you to leave in your virtual presence, so that when people engage with your posts, when they see a video, or when they see your name pop up because you've liked someone else's comment, that they're reminded of the emotion in which is, you want to spark with the ideas and the content that it is you're sharing. So we have this really interesting advantage right now, and I feel almost guilty saying advantage because we're in a pandemic, and I know it's a really, really hard time for a lot of people. But what it has afforded us is the opportunity to connect on a very human level in ways that we just simply have not had before. We are more open to share our opinions, more open to reflect, to share our beliefs, to contribute to conversations that perhaps we wouldn't have had either the confidence or the inclination to do before. But because we're kind of living this shared experience as a world, as a collective people, we feel a little more safe in connecting. And this is a really good opportunity as you're starting to think about your personal brand and step out on the scene, because we're in this stage of discovery. There are people starting new jobs. There are people starting over. There are people completely second guessing their lifetime of work that they've spent building. And now they want to try something different because for one reason or another, they've discovered they've got some untapped potential. They've realized that, time is limited. Life is unpredictable. Whatever the case is that has kind of uprooted this in them, they want to try something new. So all this to say, don't be shy about putting yourself out there, about asking questions, and about trying things, particularly as you're thinking about building a virtual presence, because so many of us are figuring it out in real time. So nothing will kind of seem out of whack. So if you're thinking, okay, yeah, this makes sense in theory, I know the importance of a personal brand, I know I've got to stand out, I know the importance of content, but where the heck do I start? This is what I want to cover in this section. So if you don't know what to post, if you don't know how to kind of develop a personal brand and stand out online, I want you to ask yourself, what is my why, or what makes me happiest? So when you think about your why, I mean, it's a loaded question, and I think a little bit over asked these days, and it puts a lot of pressure on our shoulders. I'm not suggesting that you need to have your life's purpose figured out. What I'm suggesting is that you have to know what makes you happy. And if you do know that, you have a lot of things that you can talk about with your eyes closed, that like the back of your hand, that you can riff on for hours, that you're curious about, that you have experienced, that you want to share with others, that you love to do. These are all things that can either inform which groups you join, which type of people you connect with, which posts you want to share, which posts you want to create organically, and it gives you an opportunity to connect with your network. Now, a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is LinkedIn related. Some of it will apply as well to Facebook, but I'm going to be focusing mainly on LinkedIn, and I have other kind of tidbits and tricks if you're using Instagram, Facebook, or building any kind of online community. So happy to answer any of those questions either during the Q&A or at the roundtable at the end. But regardless of the platform you're using, if you're answering what makes you happy and you're creating content accordingly, you don't have this same weight of needing to show up as someone else, as the leader, as someone who is credible, because you're just operating from a place of joy. You're operating from a place of service and saying, this is something that I really enjoy, and I think by sharing it with my network, I'm at the very least going to spark some really worthwhile conversation. So start thinking about what it is that makes you happy, what your why is, if you know it, and start sharing that with your network. It really does help to start establish your personal brand as it is closely aligned with your core values. Number 2, I want you to think about what are the 3 things that are unique to you. So 3 things that, you don't have to be the only one to do them, but the 3 things that you do differently than others. We're not looking to reinvent the wheel here. We're just looking on your perspective of the wheel. How have you built your wheel? Why do you love your wheel? Why is your wheel getting you from point A to point B? And what can we learn so that as we start to roll down our own journey, we can take from your story and bring it into ours. So the 3 things that are unique to you, if you start to pepper in your content consistently, you become synonymous with those things. So for me, some of the 3 things that I talk about the most are communication, goal setting, and leadership. And so if you're looking at my profile, you're going to see a lot of things. I have my own opinion, my own approach, my own perspective on those things. Now, I did not create goal setting, leadership, and communication, but I've been working in that area for a long time, and I have some pretty unique perspectives that if you look at my profile, if you look at my work, if you look at my content, you'll see that those things, I have a pretty unique approach to those things that are worthwhile for following me, for engaging in my content in those specific kind of niches or areas of expertise. So think about what those things are for you, how you can I said pepper in already, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but really infuse them into the content that you're creating and the engagement that you are sparking with other people on the platforms that you're engaging on and the network in which you're starting to establish a presence for yourself. Number 3, think about 3 skills that have contributed to your success. And better yet, don't just think about it, but ask people, what have they enjoyed about working with you, about collaborating with you, about meeting you? Maybe they're going to say, you know what, you were really helpful when I first joined the company. You were one of the few people who actually spent the time to make me feel welcome. Maybe you're someone who is an exceptional listener, or maybe you are great at negotiation. Get that input from the people that you trust, who you think will actually give you true feedback and are not just, blowing smoke and trying to make you feel good about yourself, but the ones who you feel confident that can actually give you some insight that perhaps you didn't know about yourself, or at least additional context. And these are the things that, you don't have to then go to LinkedIn and say, hey guys, by the way, I am a really good negotiator. But what you can say on a more human level is that I've had this exchange with one of my colleagues, and here's how we were able to close the deal, win this contract, beat our competitor, because we approach negotiation this way. And if you're looking to be a sales leader or a market expert, then these are things that your network will find particularly valuable. So think about what you've done to contribute to your own success. Ask for outside insight, as I like to call it, and leverage those kind of tidbits of information as data that can inform the content that you're going to share that will position you as a thought leader in your space and ultimately help you stand out online. Number 4, and this one is scary, I know, but consider the biggest mistakes that you've made in the last 12 months. And don't just consider them, but share them, because these are the things that, when we're building a virtual presence, when we're thinking about standing out online and really being someone memorable in that sea of candidates or in that sea of people who we see as we're scrolling through our feed, there's no shortage of people. That list is literally infinite. One of the things that will really set you apart is your ability to be real and share not only the wins, but some of the misses. And you don't have to go on there and say, you know what, this was a major flop, and just air your dirty laundry. But what you want to do is think about, how could this be of value to my network? What could they learn? What do you wish you would have known going in? What would you do differently now if you had the opportunity to start again? These are the lessons that if you share through your story, become so relatable, become extremely memorable, and really contribute to your virtual presence. But more than that, it helps to show, whether it's your future client, employer, business partner, whatever it is, that you're someone who takes ownership. You're someone worth following because you're not just sharing the good times, you're sharing what it's like in the trenches. And so that when they feel they are in the trenches, you've established this trust with them and they want to go to you for the answers. They want to go to you for inspiration, for knowledge, for information as they're looking to kind of get out of what I call pity city and back onto an upward trajectory. And finally, think about the 5 benefits of working with you. So this you may see some overlap with some of the skills that have contributed to your success, but what are the 5 things that you do and there could be more, but that move the needle? Maybe you are someone who really is very, when you're doing research, like you're really dedicated to figuring out what is my audience, what does the audience want? Maybe you're someone who's very process driven and you're thinking, you know what, I'm not the most, and I say this because there are a few people that I've worked with like this, where like they're not the most sensitive people, but I know that if I need a process in place that will optimize my workflow, that will get me to results most efficiently and will minimize risk, my process people are the ones for the job. And so that's one of the benefits for me of working with them. They bring that skill set that I can't say I lack, but it's not immediately available for me. I gotta dig kind of deep to get to my process strengths. And so think about, how have you been able to move the needle, not only in your own life, but for the companies, for the brands that you work with, or the projects you're involved in, the communities that you're in, and see what are the lessons there that you can bring to the surface that will ultimately inspire others to kind of, progress and move the ball forward in their own lives and businesses. I'm going to pause there and see if there are any questions so far.
Hi. Hello.
Hi.
Hi, I have a question actually. You're talking about to know what are 3 things unique to me. How do you know that? Because you don't know others who compete with you, in the profession you are in. So how do you know that what things are so unique about you?
3 things that are so what, sorry?
Unique.
Yeah. So I'm someone, and I know this doesn't come easily to everyone, but I don't have a trouble asking. So even people who have followed me, who've engaged with some of my content to kind of say, what's stuck out? What's resonated with you? And some of these things have come from the insights of my network, and some of them have come because I am intentionally listening and observing some of the comments that come through. And so look for indicators of, wow, I haven't heard this perspective before, or that's a really interesting take. Thank you for sharing. Something where people are engaging and showing you on some level that this has sparked kind of a light bulb moment for them. There's been a little bit of a perspective shift. That's probably something that is unique to the way in which you've described something, that you've explained something, that you've brought something to the table. And if there's something that you're thinking the market is missing, that my competitors are missing, or that I feel I do quite well, a little bit of social proof goes a long way. And I want to just, clarify that I'm not suggesting you just go out and seek self-validation. It's not necessarily designed to be a feel-good exercise. This is supposed to be an informative exercise. There's a lot of people who I think, I hope anyway, in our lives that can serve as the cheerleaders. We're not necessarily looking for a cheer squad. What we're looking for is for people to give their kind of unbiased opinion on what have I done that has been different, that has felt different, that has sounded different. And if you see that your audience is not able to give you many insight, then it's possible that you have not articulated your perspective well enough yet. And it's going to come with trying. I mean, when I first started my virtual presence journey, if you will, I was not a thought leader. There was not much unique that I was bringing to the table. And it took engaging with people, giving my opinion, disagreeing with people respectfully to understand where it was, the opportunity I had to kind of carve my place out in certain niches. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Good. All right. Any other questions here?
I had a question on when you mentioned 3 things to do differently, and if you can explain, give some tips on how do you figure that part out. It reminds me of Kamal's question of 5 benefits of working with me.
So can you elaborate a little bit on
how do you figure that out? Yeah.
How do you figure out what to do differently?
What you do differently when you mentioned 3 things you do differently.
Are you saying generally speaking, or how did I figure that out?
Well, generally for us to figure it out, and you can give your example if you'd like.
So I'll kind of take a step back in my journey when I first started my business, and it was like everyone was a coach, everyone is a consultant, and there's a really low barrier to entry in this field. Like anyone, their mother, sister, dog, neighbor can be a coach right now. And so when I hired a coach of my own, she asked me that question, what's your unique differentiator? And I almost felt personally attacked. And I was like, what? How do you not feel it? And it's just not good enough, right? You need to think about what you bring to the table that other people aren't doing as well. And this is really the qualifier. It's not that it is not available, it's that your perspective or the way that you do it is different rather. And one of the things I struggled with when starting my business and long before was sticking to my goals. I knew the SMART goal method, I understood the concept, and I just wasn't motivated to do it. And I didn't understand why. And so I started looking for a better solution. First of all, to understand why I wasn't sticking to them. And second, to see, am I missing something? Is there another method I could be using that would help me want to do it on the days that are really hard, on the days that I wake up and I think no, not today. I want to sleep in. I don't want to do this. And I didn't find nothing, hours of Google searches. And it finally occurred to me, I have to create it. This is a pain point that I'm feeling. I know I'm not alone, and I can't find a viable solution. So I could have walked away and think, well, I'm just going to make do what exists today. Or I could say, I'm going to do something about it. And so I created my own goal setting methodology, and it sounds fancy, but it is, it's another acronym. It's the REAL goal method, and it's about setting goals that are resonant, empowering, actionable, and lucrative, because that's what I felt I need. Resonant is about anchoring your goal to your why, to why you're setting this goal in the first place. Empowering is about understanding how you want this goal to make you feel. What does success feel like to you? Actionable is breaking it down into bite-sized chunks. And lucrative is understanding what's in it for me. Because I set a lot of goals to serve my clients, to become recognized, to be a #1 bestseller. But what does it mean? What is it for? What do I stand to gain if I achieve these things? And when I look at the whole picture and I see what I stand to gain, it became very clear what I stood to lose should I decide to stop pursuing this goal. And so I didn't make up those words. I'm not even the one borrowing from Simon Sinek and whoever before him and in Start With Why. I just made it my own. So it's about taking a concept, understanding your own pain points, in recognizing how is your audience, whether that's your colleagues, your customers, your prospects, your family, your community, who are you engaging with that might be going through the same pain points as you, and what solution can you bring to the table? And so I developed my unique differentiator. They weren't immediately apparent to me, but I realized I have an opportunity to set myself apart. And so that kind of became the foundation of which I started to develop my thought leadership, was looking for holes in the plan, gaps in the market, things that I realized I was suffering. Well, suffering is a bit over dramatic, but things that I was dealing with that I realized I can't be alone in this, and starting to ask, hey, have you guys also dealt with this? Is this an area in which you don't have the answer for too? And with a little bit of market research, I realized, okay, there's something here that I can make my own. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to move on. If you guys have any questions for this slide in particular, save them or add them to the chat. We'll get to them in the Q&A or roundtable at the end. All right. Developing thought leadership and credibility. So this is something, you've heard me say a couple times since we started. Your audience they're not concerned about your achievements and your accomplishments and what you've been able to do. What they care about is how those things can help them. How can that make their lives better? How can it help make them successful? Sure, you're going to find the people who are cheering for you and wishing you well, but the people who are going to look to you as a leader, who are going to interpret what you're saying as credible information, are the ones who are able to candidly take the information you're giving them and apply it in their life and say, wow, that actually worked. There's nothing more effective than sharing your story when it comes to positioning yourself as a thought leader and a credible source. Now, of course, if you're in a medical field or scientific field, you know, you're going to want to back that up by some data and some research, and your story is probably not sufficient on its own. But people don't just connect with data. They don't just connect with science. They connect with people. And what you want to do is not just share what you've done, but why you're doing it and what makes you different. So this goes back to your unique differentiators, is that when I started, there were a lot of self-limiting beliefs that there are so many coaches already. There are already so many books written about business and personal development. What could I possibly have to add to the conversation? And what I had to add that no one else had was my story, which informed my perspective. My perspective informs my thoughts inform my actions. The way I go about living and doing is unique to me in a sense. And the way that I see the world, although other people may share my beliefs and my views, I have a filter of my own, if you will, that has really informed the way I see the world. And that's my unique differentiator. That story, those lived experiences, that's what makes my approach to goal setting, communication, leadership, and anything else I talk about probably unlike something that you've heard before, because I'm not just necessarily regurgitating something that I've heard on HBR. I'm talking about it through a lived experience. So when you share parts of your journey that you are passionate about, that you're, why you got started in this field, how you entered the field, how you've been able to change the game, how you've been able to improve, optimize a process or improve the bottom line. These are things that are far more effective and memorable and really help to position you as a leader when shared through your lived experiences. It's also really important, whether you're applying for jobs or you're posting on LinkedIn and you're sharing content, to speak in the language of your audience. And I want to be really, really careful here and emphasize that this does not mean be a chameleon and shapeshift to what you think they expect of you or to what you think they want from you, but rather to recognize that they are showing up through their own filter, through their own lived experiences. And in order to resonate with them, you have to speak their language before you can educate them and help them go from point A to point B, or to follow your thought process, to teach them something new. You have to meet them where you're at. So think about where you were at the stage of the journey that they're in. And remember what you were feeling, what you were thinking. And maybe you're 1, 2, 10 years down that journey at this point, but try to go back and realize, what were you thinking? How were you feeling? What was it that you were worried about, that you were excited about? And use that to shape the language in which you at least initiate the conversation with your audience before you start bringing them into new thoughts, new ideas, because there will be some trust that's needed. And we tend to trust people whose language we feel or indicates that person will really get us. It's also not particularly relevant to speaking the language, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the consistency of sharing, whether that's your story, your posts, your articles. Oh, was there a question, or did I just? No. Okay, I thought
No question. It's only comments. People
okay.
are talking together.
Good. I thought I heard a question come in. All right, so I'll pick back up. The consistency is really important in that if you are intentionally trying to become a thought leader and more credible in your space, you have to understand that posting once in a while is not going to do it. You have to remain top of mind and tip of tongue, which means the consistency of your posts or the content that you're sharing, the amount of times that you show up on video, whatever it is enough that people remember you, and eventually, in the perfect world, they start to intentionally seek your content out. Maybe they didn't see you when they opened LinkedIn and started scrolling their feed, and they thought, I've missed content from him or her, or there's something trending right now in my industry and I'd really like their opinion on this. So consistency, really, really important. You also want to be mindful not to talk at your network, but to talk with them. The most credible thought leaders are the ones that will engage with their audience. And I use audience kind of as an all-encompassing followers, networks, friends, colleagues, but you want to make sure that you are practicing social listening, not just social delivering. You want to listen to what people are saying, how they are interpreting your information, the knowledge that you're sharing, the stories that you're sharing, the experiences that you're making available to them, and respond to their comments. If they're sharing your content, thank them, because there are other people who are engaging with your audience who, again, are competing basically for their attention, and you can keep some of that attention without even having to create new content all the time by simply engaging them, asking them, what do they think? How did they feel? Have they read something similar? How were they managing a particular problem that your industry or company might be facing? But to start a healthy dialogue and to be the facilitator of that dialogue goes a long way in establishing your leadership and credibility as well. You also want to stay up to date with the latest trends. So a thought leader and someone who has a strong virtual presence is someone who recognizes the importance of being plugged in, having their pulse on what's happening, what is the latest, what is trending, what is it that people care about, that people are questioning, and use this information to give your opinion, to share your beliefs, to challenge people's perspectives in a respectful way. But this serves as really good data or kind of a content strategy where you don't have to necessarily come up with original thought pieces all the time, but rather if you're keeping up to date with what other people care about, you can insert yourself in a conversation that matters, in a conversation that people care to follow. And by continuing to contribute to these conversations, they automatically start to associate you with those topics or you with those themes, and think, they don't even necessarily say this wasn't their content, therefore they're not the leader, but rather this was really thought-provoking content and this person had a really unique perspective. So again, it's about adding your lived experiences to the conversations and contributing to your leadership in a way that it can really only be driven through engagement. It's not that all leadership can only be driven through engagement, but there's a special kind of credibility that is driven by engaging with your audience. You also want to leverage the power of video, which is intimidating. It took me a while to come around to it. And, I spoke about some limiting beliefs before. I stayed stuck in thinking, my hair's not done, my house isn't clean, the lighting is off, I don't know what to say. And there's nothing, especially right now where we're engaging with people in person is really, really difficult. There's nothing that gets as close to in-person connections as video does right now. It doesn't need to be live, it doesn't need to be long, and it certainly doesn't need to be perfect. But what it does need to do is, all of the above. It needs to share your story, it needs to speak to your audience, it needs to talk to them, make them feel that they are part of the conversation, and it needs to touch on trends or at least topics of interest that they care about. I'm going to pause here before we move to the third section. Are there any questions?
Nope. People are loving the comments. Some people are going to use some of your tips for brainstorming, and a lot of people are going to start taking action now. So thanks a lot.
We do have a question from Stefania Picore. Concerning the point, stay up to date with the latest trends. I see very often people copy paste content from internet and just post it on LinkedIn as a sum up every day, multiple times a day. Is it a good practice?
So you're going to see that actually on, I'm going to mention it on the next slide too, but it is, I go back to what is the best practice, right? We see people doing it, therefore we assume that this is something we should be doing or something that is acceptable. If it is relevant, if you are compelled, if you think it will add value, there is really no amount of oversharing. If it checks those boxes, if you are sharing for the sake of sharing, if you think this will make me seem relevant, therefore I'll do it, and it is not inherently driven by value, I would say no, it is not a best practice, and I do not recommend doing it. If you see 6 articles a day that you think, wow, I would be doing my audience a huge disservice if I didn't share this information with them, then I would say go for it. But be mindful that you're not the only one sharing this information, particularly if it is relevant to them. And so beyond just sharing a summary, this is a huge opportunity for you to share your unique perspective. And even if your unique perspective is, I'm not sure what to think about this, what do you guys think? It doesn't have to be this mind-blowing, earth-shattering perspective. It could be, this has made me question a few things. Anyone else feeling this way? And you start to see that you generate conversation. But if it doesn't add value, don't waste your time. If it does add value, I'd say it is a best practice. But on that topic of consistency, if you post 6 times a day for 2 weeks and then you go silent for a full month and then you come back 6 times a day, it doesn't send a consistent message. It's not helping your thought leadership. At that point, you look like, Yahoo News that is doing the roundup of the top performing posts. I mean, you want to deliver value, you want to be consistent, and you want to make sure that you're not just speaking or sharing to speak, but that you're doing it for the greater good of the audience that you're serving. Did that answer?
Yeah, thank you. This was a great answer. We have another one from Beth Friedman. How do you stay fresh and relatable without seeming like you're selling?
Okay, I'm going to touch on this a little bit in the next slide. So I'll get to that. And if I haven't fully answered the question, pop back in and I'll make sure to drill a little deeper into it.
Great, we'll keep it here.
All right. So you know what? I got really excited because I wanted to answer that question. But before we do, there's a fun little stat that, on the topic of relevancy, between 1980 and 1987, information available online doubled. In 7 years, the available information on the World Wide Web doubled. In 2000, it only took 2 years for the total available information online to double. In 2013, and some of you who've been in my workshop know the answer to this, so no spoiling, but in 2013, how long do you think it took for information to double? You can drop it in the chat. And then maybe Emily, if you want to just read out a couple guesses.
Sure. We have 2 months, 6 months. So some people are saying 6 months. I thought 1 week, 3 weeks.
All right. In 2013, information doubled in 11 hours. Hours, you guys. So is 6 posts a day too much? Not if there's enough value. The world is changing at a rapid pace. And the qualifier is always, what do I have to say about this? What is my opinion? What is my belief? Why do I care about this? Again, it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be life-altering. It just needs to be something that you can contribute to the conversation that they're not finding elsewhere. Because in a matter of hours, the world changes. The information rotates. And so I love that stat. I love sharing it any chance I get because it's like, I see a couple of your facial reactions and it's like, what? And it's crazy to think, but it also gives us hope. It's like, am I posting too much? And have I said this too many times? It's like, there's so much information being shared that a fraction of your audience is seeing it the first time. So don't worry about continuing to show up with your insight and with your perspective, because there are people who are observing the value that you're sharing for the very first time. So moving on to building meaningful virtual relationships. We've, as I mentioned, all become pretty comfortable with the fact that at least for the foreseeable future, things are going to be held online. And although nothing beats in person, kind of engagement and interaction and knowledge sharing, social media and virtual communication is affording us a luxury that in-person connections perhaps didn't. So, I mean, you can't see this right now. My flexibility is like really not great, you guys, but I'm going to try to do like a high kick. Oh gosh, here we go. Slippers. There are slippers on my feet right now. I would never have otherwise given a keynote in my slippers in my life, but here we are in my home office. And this is kind of like, we are granting ourselves the ability to be real, to be human. You have access into my home and see me in a state where very few people get to. And that's something that virtual communication has allowed. And we can use these things as tools to further strengthen the relationships that we're building, to further connect on a human to human level. So when you're thinking about your sales pitch, when you're thinking about a cold outreach, when you're thinking about a proposal, or for showing up for a meeting or an interview, take advantage of the fact that our expectations have shifted. The benchmark for what it means to show up virtually has shifted. And we have an opportunity to be much more transparent, to be much more real, because we're also in a state where we're feeling kind of vulnerable. We're feeling like things are changing. Our targets are changing, our lives are changing. And we're in a very, for the most part, accepting place. So virtual relationships are kind of at an all-time high because of these factors. So we'll talk about, a couple ways to enhance your virtual presence and how those can be pulled through in the relationships that you're building. So I've had these are going to be based upon my personal takeaways. These are not something you're going to find in a listicle top 5 ways to optimize your LinkedIn profile. These are things that I've done, that I've tried, that I've tested, that have worked for me. They've opened doors for speaking for new clients. They've gotten me, on people's radars who otherwise never heard of me before. I'm not going to spoil all of them. We're going to go through them and I'll kind of explain the doors that I've opened because of them. So one of the things you really want to be mindful of is preparing your profile, which seems like a no-brainer. I'm going to talk a little bit about the aesthetics of your profile. You want to make sure that you're using an updated photo. So this is probably like, yeah, okay, I know that. And you want to make sure that you have an updated header, specifically on LinkedIn, but this applies for Facebook and Twitter as well, because that is prime real estate. If someone is looking at your profile for the very first time and they happen to be on LinkedIn mobile and they're scrolling through potential connections, people who are connected to you, who they're connected to, and now you're being suggested by some fancy algorithm, they only see your profile picture and your title. So you want to make damn sure that your picture is memorable, that your title is appropriate and relatable and updated, and that when they click on it, that the header is the first thing that's going to expand when they see your full profile, that also is an indicator of who you are, what your brand is, and what your value is. So right away, if you open my LinkedIn profile, you're going to see that my header picture is my TEDx, a screenshot from my TEDx talk. Because I want to make sure that my audience, who doesn't necessarily know me yet, but who's interested, who might be curious, who are clicking it, are seeing, oh, she's a speaker. Oh, she's a thought leader. Oh, she has something interesting enough to say that made it to the TEDx stage. I want to pique curiosity. I want to get people interested in learning more and ultimately scrolling down and sending me an invitation to connect. So maybe, for you, it's not a picture of you on stage, but maybe it's a little snippet of an infographic. Maybe it is, the fact that you are the class of 2020 graduates, something that you're proud of, something that indicates the level of work you've put in to your thought leadership or into your personal or professional growth, that at the first glance will indicate this is someone worth following. You want to connect through your feed. Your feed is a really, we kind of take it for granted. It's there, we post, but there are a couple ways to really optimize it. So your about section, so this isn't necessarily your, we're still going back to the profile actually a little bit, but your about section, if you don't generate it yourself, will be auto-populated by LinkedIn. So you want to make sure that you kind of update that with your elevator pitch or your key your key takeaways, the things that you really, really want your audience to know before they start scrolling down. And you've also got a featured section. So if you have a blog post that you've written, a video that you've made, or maybe it's not even your content, but you're thinking, wow, this was game-changing content for me. I want to put this in my featured section because I know the people who are going to connect with me will also really resonate with it. So as they see this, they're going to want to see, okay, what have you been posting? So this is where your feed comes into play. The frequency of your post, if you are seeking to intentionally build new relationships, establish thought leadership, and become recognized as a credible source in your industry, I've seen the best engagement and growth of my network with posting 5 days a week. So it sounds like a lot, but this doesn't have to be 5 posts of original long content. As we mentioned, it could be sharing a post with a key takeaway. It could be sharing an article that really, really resonated with a question that it sparked, maybe a hypothetical question, maybe a question directly to your audience, but 5 posts that put the spotlight on what you're thinking about any given topic. You can also reshare what other people in your industry or other thought leaders that you look up to are posting and kind of share some kudos with them. This is a really good tactic and strategy that I've applied because people work hard on either the content that they're creating or they just want their voice and opinion to be heard. That's why they're sharing it. So when you share it with your audience, they take note. And I've seen this with my network is that they want to reciprocate for the most part, but they will only reciprocate if you're delivering value. So if your profile is clean, if you're consistently delivering value and you start sharing, they're going to want to share your posts and your thoughts in return. You also want to start engaging, so commenting, liking. This is particularly important for LinkedIn and Facebook if you're using that for any business purposes or thought leadership purposes, because when you like and you comment, you then appear in that person's feed, assuming they have a public profile. So without even having to put a ton of thought in creating original content, you are contributing to a conversation that matters to that person and presumably their audience. So you start to become accessible, visible to the people who are following them, which ultimately grows your network. And if you're following the other stuff that we've already covered, then it starts to contribute to your following and your thought leadership, the people who are really subscribing to your way of thought. Direct messages are an awesome way at building meaningful virtual relationships. I will seek personally to connect with 10 new people a day, and I will always ask them, if they're connecting with me, I will always say, hey, if I think it's a worthwhile connection, I'll always respond, hey, thank you so much for connecting. Please don't hesitate to let me know how I can add value to your network. And it starts an interesting dialogue right from the beginning. Some people will say, oh, just looking to grow my network and nice to meet you. And others will say, actually, I've launched a podcast, or I've just started this new newsletter, or I'm thinking about going back into work after I've been on maternity leave for a number of years. Do you know anyone who's hiring in this area? And you start to build connections that go far beyond, hey, nice post. That was a great read. And you connect them again on a really human level. For the people who are familiar with LinkedIn, you'll know that there's a newer feature, probably almost a year old now, but super underutilized, is the voice message feature. And I've seen great success in sending people, you have maximum 59 seconds. And even using all those seconds is too much, especially on a first contact. But I've sent people messages saying, hey, just checked out your profile. Love that last article you posted. This is something I care a lot about too. Open the door to what it is. Do you want to go for coffee? Do you want to hop on a quick Zoom call? What other content have you been engaging with lately that's really kind of blowing your mind? Or what are you seeing in this industry? And you start to build a relationship that way, because people look at the voice note and they think, what has this stranger had to say for 26 seconds in my feed all by themselves? And it, again, piques their curiosity. They typically want to know what it is you want to go for. And if you are applying for new roles and reaching out to recruiters for open positions, this is a great way to set yourself apart from other candidates as well, because it's a little known secret that not a lot of people are using on the LinkedIn platform specifically. Groups have been really helpful, particularly for me on Facebook and not for LinkedIn. I'm in some groups on LinkedIn that have 500,000 plus people with 2 comments on their posts that are in the group. And I mean like reputable groups that are for big brands, or generally speaking, you know, maybe just like marketing as a general topic. And so it's a lot of reputable, respectable people in there, and I just don't see a ton of engagement. But people do post their content, so they won't necessarily engage with each other, but they are still putting in valuable articles, information sources, videos, so that if you are looking to stay up to date on the latest trends, it's a good place to go. But if you're looking for feedback, if you're looking for engagement, and you're looking to actually spark these meaningful virtual relationships, I have found personally better success on Facebook groups, because people are going on Facebook to engage, whereas people go into LinkedIn groups to learn. And so the intention is a little bit different. And this is where it's important too, to know your audience and to set your expectations accordingly. So there's a ton of great professional groups on Facebook that you can get involved in as well, to make sure that you're getting valuable insight and also able to promote the content that you're working so hard to build. And finally, you know, I've said it so many times, but I got to end on it, because it really is the most important part. It doesn't matter how consistent you post. It doesn't matter how good your profile is. It doesn't matter how many voice notes you send to new connections. If you're not delivering value, people are going to do their homework. They're going to look into you. They're going to look into posts. And if they come up empty-handed, they're going to make the assumption that they can't get a ton from this relationship. And remember, they're always thinking about what's in it for them. So you got to give them something. And don't be shy to think about what's in it for you, because you're not just creating for the sake of improving the lives and businesses of others. You're doing it because it can and it should help propel you forward. And this is where it's really important, kind of going full circle here, is understanding your why. Why does this matter? Why is this going to help you? And then you can start thinking about the what and the how. What do I need to do to get there, and how am I going to take those steps? But understanding your starting point is really critical, and making sure that everything that cascades from that moment is value packed. So I'm going to end there. We have 5 official minutes, but I'm happy to run over if anyone wants to chat a little bit longer than that. Any questions that are coming in that I can address? Yeah.
So we have a question from Jerome. How do you compare your virtual relations to your actual real face-to-face relations? Have you actually personally met your virtual relations?
So there are a lot that I haven't met, and they compare, I mean, I'm not comparing apples to apples here, admittedly so. And there are probably some virtual contacts that I will never meet, but being consistent has allowed me to expand my business into India, into Dubai, and I will probably never go to those places. But because they've seen my content and it resonates with their audience, I've had the opportunity to be keynotes for their conferences, to go in and speak to their teams, to deliver virtual workshops. And I'd say the relationships are, there are certain things that of course you lack, that only in-person relationships can facilitate and afford. But the virtual relationships, especially now in a time where we're looking to be creative, for innovative ideas, to support our teams, to reinvent ourselves. There are so many things that people are looking for right now, that if you can deliver even a snippet on what it is that they need, you become so important in their lives, in their businesses, in this chapter of their story. And there's a certain gratitude and connection that comes with being able to deliver exactly what's needed at the time that's needed, that forges a relationship that I haven't quite experienced like in-person business relationships. Of course, I have a lot of strong in-person business relationships too, but they weren't forged as quickly and as meaningfully as some of the virtual relationships that I've recently, had the pleasure of engaging in.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That makes total sense. And thank you. There was Jerome's previous question that I completely missed over. Is being a thought leader a state of mind, or is it more of a recognition from a pertinent group or an organization? And what are the rewards or benefits of being a thought leader? For example, I could say I'm a professional because I believe I have the expertise, or I am a professional because I have met the requirements and received the recognition from a professional organization.
Ooh, this is juicy. I love this one. So, oh gosh, where to start? Both. It is both a state of mind and something that I think social proof contributes to validating that it is indeed the case. And a personal, story, as I say, connecting through personal stories is really king. I'm a certified change management professional, and it was a little bit of my LinkedIn profile. If you really went digging, you'd find it. And here I was promoting change consulting as a service that I offered, and actually doing quite a bit of it in recent months with COVID. And it wasn't really immediately apparent. And it was a LinkedIn connection, interestingly enough, not one that I've met in person, who said, I love what you do. I watch your content. It really resonates. How come you don't have change expert in your title? Like, this is what you do. And it was a total personal block of, I can't call myself an expert because I don't have the recognition. I don't have a certification. I have a certification for my course, but it doesn't say expert on it. It just says that I've completed it. So what is it going to take for me to be recognized as an expert? And I started to do a little bit of digging and kind of self-reflection. And I started looking at the business cases that I had and the case studies that I have, the clients that I've worked with, and the businesses who have really helped make significant changes that have changed their communication, that have changed their go-to-market strategy, that have changed the way they're measuring success, that have had a significant impact on their bottom line. And I started to realize, I'm pretty good at this. And if no one's going to recognize me for it, then I'm just going to recognize myself. And it took me owning that and feeling comfortable with that. And you'll see it's not in my title now. I've changed it because I've taken on a new role, but it's something that was both a kind of a personal mindset journey, as well as taking stock of my social proof and realizing I'm not lying. I'm not being dishonest. I'm not misrepresenting myself or selling a dream by calling myself an expert. I've actually been able to achieve some pretty significant results that I feel comfortable backing up. So that was the first part of the question. There was a second part to it though. Mindset.
Yes, is it a mindset? Well, I mean, is it being a thought leader? Is being a thought leader state of mind, or is it recognition? So you answered it. He gave an example after what that looked like for him. But yeah, I think that you answered it, Jerome. Unless you want to ask.
I think there was like, does being a thought leader like open doors, or like what opportunities, what emerges?
Oh, sorry about that. What are the rewards or benefits of being a thought leader?
Got it. So three things that really are super helpful: my book, my TEDx talk, and my consistent virtual presence. You don't need to be an author. You don't need to be a speaker to be recognized as a thought leader. You need to consistently show up. And so those other things amplified and helped me scale the reach of my message, but they are not what position me as a thought leader. They are, however, very credible sources that show my audience I am really serious about the topics that I talk about. So much so that I prepared for almost a full year to deliver one talk, and that I spent pretty much another full year writing a book on the same topics. And so, not that it's necessary, but it has certainly helped open doors for me, because not everyone will take the time to write a book or to dedicate their spare time to giving a talk that will challenge the way people think. So that gives people reason to think there's something there. I want to learn what it is that she's doing. And even if they never read the book, even if they never watch the talk, but they find me online, they're going to think, well, she takes this seriously. This is something that she's obviously invested a lot of time into. So I'm going to put her as one to watch, or I'm going to follow and see if she consistently delivers value in the channel in which I'm operating. So whether that's Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever else they are, they may not be a TEDx, fan, or they may not like to read books, but they're going to go where they spend their time. And if I can add value in that channel, then it further solidifies the kind of the thought leadership position. But I will say that it is something that you have to actively and continuously build upon. Just because I gave one TEDx talk 2 years ago and I wrote a book shortly before, doesn't pave the runway for forever a thought leader. If you look at my presence and I'm actually quite silent and you hear crickets, then you're not going to want to follow. You're not going to want to approach me with new opportunities, because what have I done for you lately? And that's, unfortunately, the mentality. I say unfortunately, but honestly, it's been the fire under my butt that has allowed me to kind of fuel the passion that I have and want to stay relevant, because I know that my industry is changing and I have to change with it. I have to evolve not only my approach, but how I think and how I communicate with people. So there's constantly an opportunity for me to continue to lead in my field, because my field continues to lead.
Thank you. That's such a great answer. Thank you very much. We have one more question, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so this is from Jessica Zhang. Do you have tips to maintain a constant virtual presence without burning out? As someone who struggles with social relationships and finds them mentally taxing, I can often start well, but then have a hard time maintaining the momentum in posting or maintaining new relationships without burning out. Do you have suggestions for that? That's a great one.
Super good question. So consistency does not mean daily. Consistency means something that you can realistically maintain. So if that's once a week, that's once a week. And I know I talked about 5 posts a day. This is what worked for me, and what worked for you is going to be different. If you look at my posting schedule now, I don't post 5 times a day because it was too difficult for me to maintain. And so I'm typically posting now 2 to 3 times a week. And that feels manageable. And it still makes me present enough that I can contribute to relevant trends without feeling like I have to spread myself too thin and stretch myself beyond limits that I'm comfortable. As far as kind of what to post and how to alleviate some of that stress, some of the best advice that I received was at the LinkedIn conference that I spoke at. And one of the speakers said, you know what, I'm going to eliminate all your fears, all your worries about creating content, all the limiting beliefs you have about creating a content schedule and having it, set out 30 days in advance and getting it into Hootsuite and all that fun stuff. He's like, I'm going to bust that myth completely. And I'm going to challenge you for the next 30 days to just post about what happened in your day. And he got a couple eye rolls, like, oh yeah, okay. And I was one of them. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to try it. Because at the time I hadn't really embraced video. As I told you, I had a lot of issues with embracing video. And I thought, well, this is a challenge that I'm going to give a shot for. I'm going to see where it takes me. And the first couple days it was, value and top 3 tips and things you need to know and things that I was just like, okay, I've got this, and then those top of mind tools started to thin out as I got through the month. And my best performing video to date, with the exception of the TED Talk, has been the morning I got back from the gym, wet hair, because I got caught in the rain, with my windbreaker on, sitting at my kitchen table, and super honestly just said, I woke up and it was like, I knew today wasn't going to be a good day. I just wasn't feeling it. And I decided to go to the gym because I made the decision that I can go through this day thinking it's going to suck, or I can make the conscious effort to shake myself out of this headspace and give myself a chance at it succeeding, at it being a little more uplifting. I mean, it's 7:30 in the morning. There's a lot of day ahead, and that would be a lot of suck to endure. And I just shared it super honestly. This was my day started crappy, went to the gym, feel better, Hope this helps. I walked away not overthinking it, not worrying about what people thought, just because it's the only thing of value I could possibly fathom in that moment. And the amount of people who responded, oh man, today started like that for me too, or oh, I have those days. Those are really hard to snap out of it. Or I love the gym. That's my way to kind of, bounce out of a funk too. And speaking about building meaningful relationships, those are the things that you don't have to overthink and over-engineer and bog yourself down with the anxiety of being relevant and thoughtful and leading, and rather just sharing your story. And it really, really broke me out of my toxic relationship with video, because it showed me that I don't have to have a put together, in a blazer, perfect background, done hair, perfectly curated content to share, to still bring value to my network and to still connect with them on a human level. So a little bit of a long-winded answer, but I hope it helps in that, show up as you are, how you are with what you've got, and that's good enough. And it doesn't have to be every day. It has to be consistent, whatever that, however that can be manageable for you.
Such a great response. And you're right, perfect is not, being authentic does not mean being perfect. And we should remember that. Absolutely. Thank you.
My pleasure. It's so nice to see some familiar faces and names now that I've stopped sharing my screen. Hello, hi Miriam, Marsha, so fun. All right.
A lot of people with us. So we just want to thank you again, Samantha, for doing such an amazing presentation. Everybody loved all the content they learned, and I've learned a lot myself. Thank you, Emily, for taking care of the questions. And of course, believe it or not, this is only the second day of the 5-day virtual career conference. So don't forget to register for the other sessions. If you have any questions, I've shared all the information of Samantha. You can see her on her website, on LinkedIn. You can also connect with us at cats@mcgill.ca or on any of her social media. Thanks again for joining us and staying for all the sessions.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Samantha. It was so nice to meet you. Thank you.
Likewise.
Stopping Facebook Live and the recording.
Yeah, thank